Vermont, where we have 40 million people, and we should have, twice as that, not counting the representation that we don't have. But so to us, it's really the only solution, because we've tried every decade we try to vote in, administrations that are more for the people for this, and it doesn't work. It gets worse and worse and worse and worse. So for us, it's directly a reaction to the federal government, unlike Hawaii maybe, and unlike you mostly because it's monetary for that. But I feel we've talked to other movements, and the grain of it is that the most of them are also oppressed in certain ways by the U.S. government. We talked to Albania, we talked to Baja California, and they have the same commonalities that we do. So it's funny that you mentioned. It was interesting that you mentioned that Vermont people don't even know. Californians are the same. They know there's an independent movement, but they're going back. It's like a fringe. It's like on the fringe. It's not even important, and stuff. So I'm wondering what it's going to take, and I'll ask both of you, what is it going to take for us to get that for Hawaii to get that independence, for Vermont to show its people that they'd be better off, for us, California, what is it going to take to do
Well,
that?
before getting into that, and I will get to that question,
Okay.
I want to go back to an earlier statement you made about essentially the nomadic society of the Native Americans. And as a result, they did not necessarily constitute a quote people. And it was newer whites who came into this area, then established their nation. The whole idea of people is not necessarily limited to those who establish fee simple ownership, but even those who organize themselves in nomadic systems have to be accredited with the integrity of being considered a people, having the right to self-determination. So I just wanted to make that comment, although I don't want to detract from the rest of your comments with regards to early history of Vermont or early history of any other people. But having been an advocate for the rights of indigenous people, the first people who were the victims of colonization, I wanted to make that statement very clear. The second point I want to get to is about 50 years ago, when I was promoting Hawaiian independence. And as I say, I'm part of a continuing movement that goes all the way back to our queen, Liliuokalani. But this was a sort of a revival of that story because people were not talking about it. And when our or one of our reputed underworld leaders of Hawaii was being charged for double murder, double kidnap, and I had just gotten out of law school and I was asked to represent this defendant, who then began to attract a lot of attention. He sold a lot of newspapers because a federal strike force was coming into Hawaii and they were going to get this native Hawaiian who somehow organized the underworld and then started controlling it and stopped the mafia and stopped the Yakuza from coming in and controlling Hawaii. Okay, big news. They wanted to get after him. When he was charged with double murder, double kidnap, the prosecutor says on a certain day at a certain time you did kidnap and murder these two people. How do you plead? Guilty or not guilty? I responded for him because he was in federal prison in Washington State. And I said, we refuse to dignify this court by even answering to your charges. In fact, we ask, who are the real criminals in this court? We are not Americans, we are Hawaiian nationals. So what we did at that point, because previous to that, people didn't understand the history of Hawaii. People weren't talking about the overthrow. We were supposed to be the 50th state, and we're moving along with being the 50th state. Danny Noe, our senator, was collecting a lot of money, bringing it back into Hawaii, and all of those reasons why we were lucky to be a state of the United States of America. So then we had to begin that process of education, of conscientizing, to show people that there is hope for an independent nation. I remember going into one of our taro fields and talking with a white guy who moved to Hawaii. He had no idea of the sovereignty movement, but he was saying, and he was a leader of the anti-nuclear movement in Hawaii. And he said, I don't understand sovereignty, but I don't think the United States should be allowed to bring nuclear weapons in Hawaii and use Hawaii as a doorway into the Pacific so that we can nuclearize the Pacific. It was my responsibility to show him that the sovereignty question affects his interest. There are many other people who are saying we are sick and tired of the way the environment is being controlled or not controlled. It's going wild and we're destroying the environment. People who are not involved in the sovereignty movement. It's my responsibility to show that the sovereignty movement affects issues of environmental consideration. It's my responsibility to show all of these movements how sovereignty is so massive. It's not only the question of these business people or the economists or the thieves or any particular policy, but it's so massive that if we are going to take control over our system, the issue is not band-aids in one or another area. The issue is to change the whole shebang. But people are not familiar with what is the basis for it. And so what I've tried to develop is a very particular step or stages of decolonization. If we try to grab and eat the whole meal in one bite, we can't do it. So what I try to do is break it up into segments. And so what I talk about is the 5 stages of decolonization. First stage is a stage of recovery and rediscovery. The same things that we have just been talking about. What is the early history? What is the legitimacy of being taken in to the United States? And in our particular case, we have a particular history. We can talk about the theft, the illegality, the violation of our human rights. And as a result of that and an understanding of that, you watch the society, and the society will go through a second stage, and it's called the mourning phase. The grievance, the anger, or in more common parlance, the piss off stage. And then we enter into, and it's a dangerous stage because then we get stuck into what I call the awfulizing, the moaning. Oh, poor us, look at our condition because Americans have done this and done that. But that's a natural stage. It's a natural phenomenon.
Yeah, the victim.
So anyone who has suffered from a crime is going to go through that stage. And then you build that energy, that anger. But it's a negative anger. Because what you're looking for is a solution that only will resolve the historical injustice. And you cannot build nations based on historical injustice. You have to do far more than that. And so you come to the third stage. And that third stage is the dreaming stage. You still continue with the vigor, the anger, the passion. But now you try to reconstruct a society in your own thoughts on how we can improve where we're at. We already have the justification for it. But how is the changed society going to improve today's condition and allow people to join in this prophetizing of what a future, an independent future can be. Let them begin to actually see, to feel. Let them join in the common dreaming.
Mm.
So that's a third stage, the dreaming stage. And in the dreaming stage, it's so important because you need at that point to begin to form a consensus among people who can say, yes, let us try to rebuild a society based on these new principles. It's not good enough to argue about the bad principles of the present occupier or the present colonizer. But what are the renewed principles that you will place in its place? One structure that I have tried to do in that analysis and say, what is a real problem that we are facing in Hawaii? In Hawaii, we have a deep culture that is controlled by two basic principles. The first principle is domination. It's a principle that has swept through over the last 100, 200 years through America. The principle of domination. And a lot of people take it all the way back to the book of Genesis. And they can actually cite where God created and said, okay, man, you have the right to dominate. Domination. The second principle is the principle of individualism. They elevate the individual above the group concern. Very anti-indigenous concepts. So you have domination, individualism, and the third is the principle of exclusion. If you're not part of us, you're against us. The way we do wars. Look at what they did in Vietnam. They're not human beings, they're gooks. They're commies. You change a name, they take away the very humanity of your enemy. And that way it's easier to make them into enemies. So you have these three fundamental principles. Domination, D. Individualism, I. Exclusion, E. This DIE, deep culture, that seeps through our economic system, our military system, our social system, our education system, our health system, our political system. And so we have a society that continually divides and separates one another. That is a primary society that runs Hawaii. And what we're trying to do is change it. But it's not good enough to say that is a bad society. We have to find an alternative. So in Hawaiian, we go into our culture and we say, what is the opposite of domination? It's olu olu. It's to work with other people. We can still disagree, but not to the extent of conquest or overcoming. I had an interview with Desmond Tutu. And I brought up the idea that isn't this where it all comes from the Bible? He said, no, brother, you're reading it wrong. I said, what do you mean? That's what the Bible says. That's what the term says. That's what the literature says. He says, no, you're reading it wrong. I said, what's so wrong about it? He says, you have to read it with a God-like, loving sense. So even that interpretation, you cannot just take the literal redneck Bible thumping people. You have to read it with the idea of the godliness. What is he saying? He's saying the culture needs to switch. The language may be the same, but how you interpret and how you carry it out. In Hawaiian, it's olu olu. To be kind, to be gentle. You can still have competition, but be caring. The next one, individualism. We always talk about lokai, working together, supporting one another. Yes, there is still individualism within the society, but let us not get carried away so that the individual can overcome the care of the group. So these are different values. It's lokai. Instead of exclusion, it's always a concept of aloha. to be inclusive with a sense of caring, sharing. So instead of the DIE, deep culture, we have OLA in Hawaiian, Ola. It means life, it means health. So, what we need to do is have people begin to imagine that we can control a society. Not necessarily by changing the government or changing the individuals, but changing the deep culture so that when we change, everything switches. And that is the real revolution that can come about. Now, if you can build people's dreams around these concepts, 1 minute, but you're asking it to wait 1 minute.
I'm sorry. We 2 more minutes,
Just
and then 2 minutes
sure.
for Poka, and then 2 minutes for Jim.
So
Theo, I'll get to you in a
I
second.
have, supposedly I'm supposed to be explaining what do we do here in Vermont in order to wake people up to this. And I just wanted, I'll say quickly that we were an independent republic. So historically we have that. We, instead of the stage that you're talking about, we call it the visionary stage. And we've had conferences and beautiful conferences, and everybody loved what we had to say, but then it doesn't go any further. So I don't see any hope for it happening. But that's what we have done to
Let, let,
people.
let me interrupt and apologize for doing so. What I'm talking about is what we started about 40, 50 years ago.
Mhm.
And it takes time. It seemed like an impossible task, but it is only through the building and the teaching of our children themselves so that now the society has flipped over. So in Hawaii, you have about 70% of the population who support sovereignty, Hawaiian sovereignty. They know that the Hawaiian nation was stolen. How they're going to resolve it is still uncertain. Even the US Congress has apologized for the theft, but they refuse to give back. So we're making some progress. And so what I'm saying is that it is a long road, and there's many other parts to that road, but it's a process. It's a human process. You know?
So, Theo, I see
Yeah, we're
you.
working on it.
Give us about 5 more minutes. We're still wrapping up the conversation, and then we'll go right to you, sir. Okay? Thumbs up. Okay.
Sounds good.
Jim, last minute comments, websites people could find you, or the Second Vermont Republic. We're going to take a few questions here from the audience. I just want to get them to get it. So, if you could quickly, Jim, tell people how they could find you, a couple websites you want to plug, any last minute comments, and then we're going to go to questions from the audience.
Right. Yeah, we have a wonderful site, www.vermontindependence.net. Or is it vermontindependence.net? Oh my God. It's full of wonderful articles by people from all over the world who are looking to improve the state of humanity, is where you would go. And then you can hook up with us however you may wish. You can get in touch with me that way, or our publisher, Rob Williams.
And we've talked to Rob Williams. He said he'd like to do an interview for the next CALEXIT conference. So we will continue our conversation with Vermont. Poka, we're going to have a second segment with you. But just to wrap up this segment, any last minute comments, websites you want to plug? And then we'll go to questions from the audience. And then Theo will come to you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, the website is called hawaiianperspectives.org, and I've put up a lot of different kind of papers on it. So it's again hawaiianperspectives.org.
Great.
Okay. If you could voice loudly your question. I know you're not going to be on camera, but maybe stand here. You're off camera. Okay, and then just loudly say your question to Jim and Poka.
I feel incredibly indifferent towards CalExits because how I see it, when you have one bad government and you stack up its problems and then the reaction to that is to create another representative government which could be equally ruler like and equally bad. I just fail to see the point. Even if there is some good short term gain, it could go the same route as electing Obama before having Trump come in office as a reaction to that, partly. Or it could go the same route as having Prussia support freedom of religion before becoming a German Nazistic superpower.
So the question is, you want to break off from the current government. How do you know that your government's going to be better and not just repressive again? Uh, Quick answers. Jim, are you there? Okay, let's go to Poka. Quick answer to the.
Yeah, the my response is there's no guarantee
Mm.
that you're going to have a better government. The whole idea of self-determination is that the people who will face the realities, the people who will face the screw ups or the benefits of an independent government are the people themselves, rather than a colonizer or another group of people coming in and making that determination. So, in the Hawaii case, what we're saying, or what I'm saying, is that the decisions that are made is better decisions if it is made by the Hawaii people rather than people from another place deciding for us. It's the same principle of the American colonies saying, why should we be ruled by a foreign people with a foreign concept? England. It is Americans who should control their own destiny. And that's the whole principle of self determination as opposed to other people determination. But again, there's no guarantee that freedom is will make wiser choices for the people themselves.
Jim?
That is the
Yeah.
reason.
I agree completely. And I go back to law, his history of law. It's called safety of the whole. And in another word, Ethan Allen called it the right to self-preservation. That is a right that seems to have like disappeared in people's minds. Freedom and liberty seem to have disappeared in people's minds. It's not that which they would, but I can't argue that point because there are too many people who want to argue the other side. But it will certainly turn the power back to the people who actually live there. And the other point on that, in that area, is that too big is too big. And when you shrink it so that you can be listened to and so that you can have a dialogue, that's a better government than some people too far away who are imposing their government on you.
Okay.
Correct. Can I just jump into that to answer my view on it? Just like Boca just alluded to, we come from a country that was oppressive, England. In your argument, that would mean that when a society becomes aggressed too much, has too many grievances, then the U.S. shouldn't even be here, because why not just stay in England? Because we might create a worse government in the U.S., which the argument being that let's not do it because we're just going to mess it up, because we're human, we're going to mess it up. But we did exactly that, for our independence. And it turned out okay. But what happens in societies, in all societies, is that it goes too far, too extreme. There's oppression, there's cultural divide, and throughout the history of the U.S. for independent California, as far as we're concerned, we're very different culturally than the rest of America. So let's not forget that, and we're oppressed just the same way. So yeah, like Poca said, are we going to mess that up if we become independent California? We could, but we hope to learn from the lessons of our predecessors and not make those mistakes and reform a government more to our liking, or to Vermont's liking, or to Hawaii's liking, because they're their own people. And when a system becomes so big, like the United States, where culturally it's divided, then I think the argument of not trying to get a better government is a false one in that sense that you can't say I'm not going to try something because I may make a mistake. Basically, you have to try it. So that's my view on it as far as that. But I'll let you guys.
Yeah, just
have
so in 5 minutes total, because Theo's being very patient with us. So
okay.
if we could wrap up the questions, so we're going to go to other audience questions, and then quick questions, quick answers. Yes.
Well, just to respond to Cody's question, because that's an extremely valuable question to us. How do we guarantee we're going to be different from what we're coming out of? Well, we have a couple of things. One that we're doing and one that we could do. The thing that we already do, not just in California, but in other U.S. states, is direct democracy via the initiative, referendum, and recall. Okay, the U.S. government doesn't have that. Right now, they're fighting in France for that. Okay, but California and some other U.S. states already have that, where we can initiate legislation ourselves, which we can make binding parts should the need arise of our Constitution. Try doing that in the U.S.
Good point.
At the federal level. So we have that measure of direct democracy. But there's the other question of the relation between direct democracy and representative democracy. And on a number of our sovereign indigenous nations, when they recuperate their sovereignty, one of the things they do is to hold a general assembly of that entire nation, which, because they're small, they can do, and then between sessions of that GA, you have the executive council at work, and that executive council is extremely constrained in what it can do by the GA. If there's something where they have a question about it, then they reconvene another GA. We can do the same thing. I mean, we have as many people as Canada, and when our country is reunified, we'll have more. But we can do the same thing.
Cool.
Okay, last minute comments. We got 2 minutes to go, and then we got to do Theo. Jay, I see you. Thanks, Jay Arias from Baja Independence. On the screen, Jay, we will ask you to be joining us again really soon with Matt's presentation, but we're going to have to wrap up this international panel, I'm sorry, and then do an interview with Theo Slater from the CNP. So last minute questions from the audience.
I just want the same question I always ask everyone from different states. What is your opinion on California independence? Do you see any negatives as far that you would be affected by? Poka, Hawaii, Vermont, would you guys say no? That would be a great example to start with. If California were able to do that, it would help us. So what is your opinion? Do you see any negatives or just positives or in between? Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, are you asking me?
Yes.
Yes.
I would love to see California independence. I would love to see Alaska independence or Alabama independence. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Good.
Poka?
I think there's two views. The first is that first you have to identify who the people of California are and make sure that it is their wish to become independent. I believe that the downfall of the American empire would be a good thing, because it's not just a downfall of the American empire, but the next question, and then what? I believe that only through the downfall of the American empire will the United States of America be a better nation, be a better neighbor. Learn that this ideal of exceptionalism for the United States does not cut it. That the United States need to abide by all of the rules that every other society should be abiding by. And so if peoples within the United States are saying, we're dissatisfied, we need to break away because we don't like the way the United States operates, that may change the whole course of the United States and all of its major policies that have been talked about. So for that reason, I think it would be good.
Beautiful.
Okay,
Okay.
we're going to conclude this segment. I just want to say, Jay Arias from Baja Independence, thanks for joining. Unfortunately, we got to cut this segment short. Jay, please come back in 30 minutes for a presentation with you and Matt. So 30 minutes, come back on Zoom. We're going to go to Theo. So, Jim, I got to say goodbye, sir. Thank you. We will put this on YouTube and send it out. So, Jim, if you could go off of Zoom, and Jay, if you could go off Zoom, sorry.
It's okay, I'm just testing my environment here.
Okay, all right. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, bye, Jim.
Thanks,
Bye,
Jim.
Jay.
Thanks so much, Jim, for your time.
Theo, give me a second to get the cameras rebooted, and we'll start the whole thing over again. So
Sounds good.
give me 1 minute, and we'll get everything together. Okay. So,
Should I keep rolling or should I stop? No, I'm gonna.
Jim, we need you to leave the meeting, sir. Yes. If you could stop your camera.
Yeah.
And then keep everything the same. We're just gonna have Theo as
And
the main.
okay, guys, we're coming.